Okay, so welcome to our introduction to farming in Sullivan County. My name is Ashley Tully again. This is Michelle Proscia. Thank you for being here. And we're going to give a brief presentation that's really an overarching kind of bird's eye view of farming and some of the zoning, regulatory concerns, as well as marketing and business considerations. And this is really adapted from the Cornell Small Farms Guide. So today we'll review getting started, which will go over leases and zoning. We're going to go over business considerations, marketing considerations, and then resources that are available to you both locally, regionally, and federally. So the first thing I would say is to ask those who come before you, and here you are doing that. You're gleaning information from the resources that are out there, and that's the best way to do that. So there's plenty of resources online, and there's also people farming in your community that we highly recommend getting in touch with and finding a mentor that can really walk you through the process. And we're here at Extension to help you do just that. Michelle, you wanted to go over the leasing property?
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. My name is Michelle Proscia. I'm one of the ag educators over there at Sullivan County. And just before I get into this, you can throw your questions in the chat box. I believe there'll be plenty of time at the end to answer any questions. So I know this is going to be a lot of information that we're going over, but we are recording it, and the presentation will be available for you guys to look over as well. So But up first here, a lot of times when we see beginning farmers often starting, sometimes access to land can be a little cumbersome, or owning land. So what ends up happening is a lot of farmers or beginning farmers choose to try and lease property. So even if you're buying or leasing property, there's a couple things that you want to consider when trying to kind of figure out what type of land that you're looking at. And depending on what type of farming that you'll be doing, different type of land often is a little bit better option for what you're doing. So, vegetable farming versus cattle versus, hemp farming, anything like that. So you want to understand the soil type that you have, any drainage, if you need access to water, fencing, like what will you need to bring to the land, or bring the land up to speed in order to get your farming business started. So those are some of the things that you're trying to figure out before you A, lease, or B, purchase. And then you want to look over different plots of land and make sure that those match up to what you're trying to do. Next. So when you are writing lease, it doesn't have to be too complicated. There are several templates available online, but I just kind of wanted to go over briefly about what they are. And basically, within this document that will be signed by both parties, you're going to show basic description of what you're actually leasing, whether that's just the land, if there's any buildings, equipment that goes with it. You want to make sure that those are accurately portrayed on that lease agreement. Any condition that they're in prior to you leasing, so that you, should there be any damage or deterioration or anything that you don't want to be accountable for at the end of the lease, it's just good to document, and so that risk isn't on your behalf. What are the rights of each party? So spell out any restrictions. You're not allowed to spread manure here or there, or don't use this part of the land, whatever the rights or restrictions are of each party. So you want to make sure that's labeled out. If there are any improvements that are needed on this property, who is going to be involved or have to pay for that? If there are structures, are they your responsibility? Are they the owner's responsibility? It all depends. So these are the types of things you want to hash out in your lease agreement before you lease the land. So, you know what you're getting into financially during the course of your lease. If there are any certain agricultural practices that need to be followed, such as organic standards, things like that, you just need to know whether or not what you are or aren't allowed to spray on that property. If you're leasing, if you own it, it's all yours, whatever you want to do. So that's things to consider beforehand. Alternately, there is some condition that's generally put in there, but it's generally common practice that the land be left in the same condition that it was put in when you started the lease. But most times it's probably better, right? Because you farm the property, you've harvested off of it. Generally, things aren't overgrown after you've stopped farming on the property. So, generally you don't want it to be in worse condition. Payment terms, lease payments, how are you going to pay that? Sometimes people pay in cash, sometimes they pay for product. So if you want to grow, say, cows in the property, hey, I'll take, a couple quarters of beef and we'll call it even, however you want to do it. A couple chickens, right? And that's basically what a lease agreement is. Again, there are templates that are available. They can be simple, they can be complex, lawyers, it just all depends on what level of risk you're willing to take. So, and of course, the length for farming, especially if you're doing agriculture assessment, it's a 5-year lease is the minimum. But generally, if you're doing any kind of crops or orchard, you want to have the length of your lease be best for your production style or system, okay? Who's going to pay for the insurance, the taxes, generally are the responsibility of the owner of the property. It's part of the lease agreement, but you just want to make sure that you detail that in there. And any provisions on how to solve things in case you both disagree on something. So if anybody needs any templates, you can definitely reach out to us, or if you're looking to purchase property as well, we have kind of insights on that. Up next, kind of zoning regulations and farming. This, I cannot stress this enough. And if I could bold or yell it from the rooftops, I would. But the number one rule when you begin farming is make sure that you're allowed to farm what you want to farm on your property. So definitely check your zoning to make sure that if you want livestock, you're allowed, and you're allowed to have the amount that you want to have. Some zoning you're allowed to have a cow or 2, but not 10, or a couple chickens, but not 100. So just make sure that you check your zoning regulations and before you start farming and before you start putting money into the infrastructure. And if you want to know how to, we'd be happy to show you where to find that on the website, but I believe it's eCode 360 is where I pull most zoning regulations for towns. And make sure that you know any restrictions, road setbacks for fencing, signage requirements, if there are any, and any site plan requirements if you do need them for building. Okay. So Ashley will talk about this a little bit later, but there is something called an agriculture district, and that does help farms out if you are located in one. And many times farms that are located within the district are exempt from some of the local and state regulations, including some building codes, providing stamp plans for farm buildings, and some seeker reviews. So, and when you get to situations and when you're trying to figure out, what applies and what doesn't apply, you can always call our office and we can guide you through that as well. Farm vehicle registrations. So oftentimes farms do have kind of a designated vehicle that is used for farming. And there's a certain DMV registration form that you can get to have on this vehicle. And generally it has to do with the reduction on um, taxes on the vehicle as well. So it helps with your certification of farm vehicle use. So there are some restrictions on that though. I think I talked about it, right? At some point. But anyway,
I think, I
go ahead.
think you're, maybe I skipped it, but I think it was just more of the kind of restrictions of moving your vehicle on the road is what we have here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in addition to your regular vehicle that may have your farm vehicle tag, there are also vehicle registration or regulations, I'm sorry, if you're moving tractors or equipment on the road. Yeah, I'm sure you've all seen it. I'm sure you've all been stuck behind something before and you notice that giant um, orange triangle. That's a requirement if you are putting the tractor on the road, even to go around. You know, you don't want to be in trouble with the law. Just make sure that your tractor does have a orange triangle on it. It's also unlawful to use any equipment on the public highway between 30 minutes after sunset and 30 minutes before sunrise, or any time when visibility is less than 1,000 feet. So it's all about safety, you know. So, you know, if it's unsafe or you're not sure if you can see where you're going, definitely cars can't see you. So just make sure that, you know, you're using that. Keep that in the back of your mind.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Those are some of the things that are really important when you're starting off and isn't always very, you know, it's not the dream and interesting stuff that people are always talking about, but it comes up quick. And so thank you for giving us such a thorough overview. Another very important, I think, part of the process is getting your soil tested and really understanding your soil. So taking a course on soil science is something that we highly recommend. There's lots of information on the internet, books, etc. But what we recommend is to get a soil test started so that you have a baseline and to kind of create a schedule for yourself. So the fall is a great time to start. It gives you the opportunity to both assess your sample and do something with that information prior to the growing season. So it's basically our seasonal recommendation as well as a starting point. Cornell works closely with Dairy One and Agro One labs. Soil testing depends on what you're about to grow, and the importance of soil testing is one, to optimize your crop production so that your soil medium has the right balance for the crops you intend to produce, which varies. So you'll have to have a plan and be able to, you know, that's what's going to show up on your soil test. It also depends on your land itself. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an example of filling out the form, which one of the more unuser-friendly parts is finding out your soil type, which is available through a soil mapping survey on the USDA website. But you're doing this so that potentially you might be able to improve the nutritional balance of your soil, and that you're also saving money and energy so that you're applying the right amount of fertilizer and you're not, you know, basically operating in a mystery space. So you can safely submit your samples directly to a lab, to the lab, which is Agro One, or you can work with your local CCE office, which is us here in Liberty, to assist in that submission. Submissions cost between $13 and $18, depending on what you're producing. And you'll often need several samples to get an accurate idea of your plot size or your fields. And there's kits available. So essentially if you were going to do it individually, you can just have the kit mailed directly to your home. You'll send it back. It takes about 2 business weeks to be able to get your results. The website and phone number is here, but I'll also put that in the chat before we finish today. And it's a pretty simple process. And what we also offer is the ability to analyze your results. So it'll come back with a bunch of data, and if that doesn't look clear to you, we're here to help figure out what that means to your production schedule and the amendments that you might want to add based on your results. So the web soil survey from the USDA, the top of the page looks something like this. And I'm just going to review this process with you quickly, as it's a part of filling out your form is knowing your soil subtype. I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to pull up a website. So just bear with me for a moment. Can everyone see my screen, which is the USDA Web Soil Survey website?
Yes.
Great, thank you, Michelle. So first step is pressing this green button here to start your web soil survey. It will take you to this screen, which is a map. And you'll see several tabs, banners. The first thing you're going to do is go to the address under the quick navigation and put in an address of your property. So essentially where you're farming, not your mailing address, but the actual location. You're going to click view. I've put in SUNY Sullivan, which has a working farm. And from here, you'll get a section of the map under the address and you can pick a field. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this right here, which I think is the farm. It's going to zoom in on that. And the next step is getting the AOI. So you can get a rectangle, or most properties aren't rectangular. So you may actually draw your space. For time purposes, I'm going to do the rectangle because it's a little bit easier. And it's creating a section on the map here where you'll see the grid lines. From here, you'll be able to click on Soil Map. It's a tab up here on the left-hand side next to the area of interest, which is your property. And you'll see over here on the left, it gives you the types of soil. Generally, you'll have a percentage that is larger, and you'll also able to click on the soil type to get more information about it. So that's a very brief overview, but it's really interesting. I recommend doing it on your own time as well, playing around with the website and learning a little bit more about soil types and the soil type of your property or the property you're planning on leasing, as it is an important way to make some of those decisions and find out what, if you don't already know what you're planning to grow, this is just a great way to learn a little bit more about your property, and hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. Business considerations. We're all on the same page, yeah? So this is a large part. It's one of the most important. So we're going to talk a little bit about your agricultural districts. The purpose is to encourage the continued use of farmland for agriculture production. There's several benefits, which is preferential real property tax treatment. It gives you protection against overly restrictive local laws, government-funded acquisitions and construction projects, and protection against nuisance suits involving agricultural practices, which is maybe one of the #1 benefits. Often odors and sounds coming from farms can bother neighbors, and you would be surprised at how frequent and common this occurrence is. Or maybe you would not be surprised. I was surprised. So how to enter. There is an open window once per year, and that's between April 1st and the 30th. You're going to contact the county planning department to enter into your agricultural district. The process is an application, so you'll submit your application and a site visit will follow. There is a farmland protection board here in Sullivan County, and that board will review essentially the site visit recommendation, which happens from two parties of that board, and the legislature will add your property from this recommendation if it is approved. If it is denied, there will be feedback given to you as well as maybe recommendations of what you need to do to come into compliance so that you may be able to reapply in the future. So agricultural assessment and agricultural districts are often confused. One has to do with zoning, one has to do with taxes. That's the simplification of it. What agricultural assessment does is it allows eligible farmland located in or outside of an agriculture district to be taxed at its agricultural value rather than at the market value. So generally, why you would apply is to reduce your property taxes. It's not a cash fall, so it's not always as sweeping as people may think, but it can reduce your property taxes. And this really just depends on the size of your land as well. So paying taxes based on your agricultural value of land determined each year by the state and not by your local market conditions. So what's going on in the market right now, this is a good example of why this is very important. In most cases, the state's value per acre are lower than your property's assessed value. Agricultural assessments and how to qualify. So the basics is that you must have 7 acres or more of land in production. So this is important. It can't be future production or what you'd like to do on it. You're currently producing crops for sale, which means you have a sales history, livestock or livestock products. The same farmer must farm that land for at least 2 years. Farming enterprises must generate at least 10,000 in sales, which is an average over the preceding 2 years. And a combination of enterprises generating 10,000 in sales will qualify. Up to 2,000 in wood product sales. So if you're selling wood like timber, logs, firewood, can qualify towards that minimum. Startup farms are eligible if they generate 10,000 in sales their first year of operation. For farms that are less than 7 acres, they can qualify if they generate 50,000 in sales. If at least 7 acres of the land owned by a rural landowner is rented to a farmer, so this goes into some leasing considerations, who meets the income requirements, they're eligible for an agricultural assessment provided the landowner has a 5-year written lease with the farmer. The renting farmer must generate at least $10,000 in sales from their entire operation, of which only part might be added. A part might be the rented land. My apologies. The types of farming enterprises that will qualify are field crops, fruits, vegetables, horticulture specialties like greenhouses, nursery items, your livestock or livestock products, maple, honey, Christmas tree sales, aquaculture, woody biomass, commercial horse boarding operations with 10 or more horses boarded at a time also meet these requirements. The process. So you'll come into the Soil and Water District Conservation Office. That's here in Liberty as well, both Cornell Cooperative Extension of Sullivan County and Soil and Water Conservation District Sarin Office. It's 64 Ferndale Dumas Road and open Monday through Friday. You'll complete a soil group worksheet, and all land qualifying for the agricultural assessment is grouped by soil type. So the Department of Soil and Water will do this for you, and there may be a fee, and you'll need your tax parcel numbers. Take the completed soils worksheet to your town county assessor to obtain copies of the agricultural assessment application form. It's RP 305. Complete one form for each parcel. The assessor will keep the soils worksheet on file and make copies of the soils worksheet and application for your records. Agricultural assessment applications must be filed every year prior to the taxable status date. That's March 1st. Agricultural assessment is not automatic, so this is also a little confusing, and it's just something that you would need to keep on top of. You must apply every year by the taxable status date. If you fail to apply, you will not receive the exemption. If no changes have been made in land use for farming, then after the initial application, you will file a short form, RP 305R. If you buy or sell land, make sure you complete a new soils worksheet and file a new agricultural assessment form to reflect those changes.
Real quick, Ashley, I know that that whole section, it sounds very complicated, but it's super common with farmers. It's just a benefit that New York State has to offer. Basically farming in New York State, because there's such high property tax and land values. So it's an opportunity for farms to reduce their property taxes. So it's not so bad. It's a simple form. All you have to do is make sure you make enough of your gross income, file that with your Schedule F, and the rest is just a little paperwork. So no worries on that.
Just give us a call if it feels intimidating, and we're happy to help you. And so is the Department of Soil and Water. They are very experienced and they do it all the time. So thank you, Michelle. The next topic we're going to cover is your business plan. So not always the dreamy part, you know, everyone's very focused on technical production, as we are, and business is 50% of the effort. You can't be in the farming world if you're not going to make money. Otherwise, you're really having a hobby farm, and it's a little bit different. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So a business plan is really important to your success. It gets your thoughts out on paper, and it's an opportunity. So it's a document that summarizes the operational and financial objectives of a business and contains detailed plans of the budget showing how you're going to realize those objectives. What a business plan will contain: a brief explanation of your background, some information on the legal structure and your management team, how you'll run your operation, your financial statements. This is a really important part, and often a part that is a challenge. So we're also here to help with any business planning concerns you may have, and price and production development. Creating a balance sheet, your income statement, and a cash flow statement is a really important part of your business plan. You'll want to have a vision, a mission statement, some key values that really hold your business and your structure together, and goals for your business. You'll also have your production plan. So what is your plan for growing? How? Details is really important. And your marketing plan. So how are you going to go about sales, and what is going to look like? So all of these details are really important. People often skip this step, and we can't stress enough how important it is. And again, we have several courses, and we'll also be having a series later this year, which is essentially a 3-part series. Well, you can create a business plan as well as a marketing plan, which will go a little bit more in depth. And afterwards, you'll be able to submit that to our facilitators, and they'll be able to review it, give you feedback, and get you ready for funding, basically. An important part of the business plan is that it's what you need to access grant money or any type of loans. And without it, you're really not going to be able to access that outside funding. It is really difficult to grow or scale your farm on profits alone, and it may be the hardest way to do so. So we really encourage you to put your ideas down on paper, use the resources that we have available here at Extension, and put a business plan together so that you can access some of those funding, which are available to farms. New York State's very invested in growing more farms and growing more farmers. So it's a really ripe opportunity. Still, you'll want to really analyze your estimated startup costs. You're going to have a projected income statement with a written explanation of your budget assumptions. So you don't have to know everything. You do have to think about what things are going to cost, and you have to be realistic about that as well. So projected balance sheet with a written explanation, a sensitivity analysis showing your business break-even points. And generally you want your business plan to be less than 10 pages. So that's maybe a version of a simplified business plan. You're also going to want to consider registering your business name. This is part of marketing. This gives you the opportunity to brand yourself and take away any risk of liability of somebody having the same name or it being very confusing. It's important for taxes and other really business implications down the line. So it's not required, but it is a protection, and all you have to do is register it with the county clerk in the county that you reside or operate in. It's generally only a fee of $25 to $50, and it helps prove that you exist. A lot of people accessed funding during COVID that hadn't accessed funding before, and it is sometimes a barrier if you haven't already established yourself as a legal business enterprise rather than a sole proprietor. So we'll talk a little bit about the differences. It can also be a requirement to open a business checking account. So it's a simple step, but we do recommend it. And if you have any questions, we're happy to help connect you with the county clerk. So you can do some research on the structures, and there are 7 different ones. So I'm just going to review them here quickly. A sole proprietorship is the simplest form. It's when an individual simply declares himself a business operator. There's no paperwork needed to file with the government, and to establish the existence of your business, the proprietor has unlimited liability for actions and debts of their business. A general partnership, a partnership agreement between sole proprietors. So there's no paperwork needed for this to form your business, and partners have unlimited liability. So essentially you're taking on some risk for both of these. A limited partnership, also known as a silent partnership, where an individual joins a partnership but stays out of the management aspects of the business. For remaining silent in the operation, the partner generally obtains the profits of an owner and does not have legal liability of the full partner. Limited liability company, LLC. You'll see this is a very common and popular choice. It's a partnership offering the limited liability of a corporation. Paperwork must be filed with the state to establish this form of ownership, and management meetings must be held. A business C corporation. Structures used most by companies. The business is operated by a management team that reports to a board of directors. Ownership of the business is in the form of stock and shareholders. And it's not always the most common, but it is a structure that is something that you can research heavily. It's very common in all businesses, but it is something that you could think about doing if you want to have kind of a cooperative farm model. A business S corporation, a corporation that is operated like a partnership and offers limited liability to the shareholders. Again, paperwork must be filed with the state to establish this form of ownership, and a management meeting must be held. A cooperative, an organization owned by members who contribute equally toward the business and share the profits generated. This is formed by filing with the state and has a similar governance as a C corporation. Voting is either 1 vote per member or in proportion to the patronage of the cooperative, how much you participate, and members have limited liability. So they are essentially safeguarded. So it can get really, you can go pretty deep into that. And I do recommend that you research a little bit. Again, LLC is very popular, as is sole proprietor, but we do recommend establishing yourself once you've sort of started. And now we're going to go into some marketing considerations. So It's a big part of the business plan. It can't be underestimated. How are you going to sell? So you're really going to have to start by assessing your market potential. So in your farm dreaming stage, you're going to kind of analyze the market. So who is your target market? Consumers, businesses, industries, institutions. Are you going to do retail or wholesale? It's great to start by just writing some thoughts down. So start with a big piece of paper, across the top, a brief description of your product as you have, conceived the idea, and write the answers to the next following questions. Who will buy my product? Why will they buy my product? What are they going to pay for my product? And where do they expect to find this product? So there's essentially some basics to marketing, and it's consider the 4 Ps. You want to think about placement. You want to think about price. You want to think about your product. How is it different? And all of this is really important before you start, so that you understand what's different about what you're doing and what's needed in the market. So kind of doing a SWOT analysis of what's going on around you. So where you see yourself in this market, what your talents are, what you're good at, and what is needed that you could provide to that market. Who are you providing it to? Where are they going to find it? So your placement. So when you're finished, you're going to step back and consider what you've really learned about this exercise. Take a brief, focused description of your target market. An assessment of which aspects your business needs to change in order to attract that market. So a lot of this is geared on if you are operating already, but a list of what is involved in making these changes. So this is just some considerations to think about. What am I going to market? Why? What is my product? What is the best method to package and present my product? And what needs do my product fill? So if you're interested in diversified vegetables, or you're interested in hemp or marijuana production, there's a lot of stuff to consider, since many of those markets can be, a lot of structures are very similar. And so sometimes people will start out doing diversified vegetables, for example, and they'll grow 26 different vegetables, everything that will grow in the season that they know of, things that they see at the farmer's market or that they see at the grocery store. You want to think about what you're going to do that's different than somebody else, where you're going to sell it, and if it's essentially just a repeating product, or if you're going to specialize in, Asian greens or specialty produce that you don't see very often. Are you going to target restaurants that have niche products and really want to do something special and create kind of a relationship prior to growing? So asking what your audience might want is a great place to start. And considering these things ahead of time will save you a lot of heartache, a lot of headaches, and a lot of money. So it's really important to analyze your assets as well as what you can provide. And we do a in-depth marketing class both here in December as well as through the spring that I would encourage you to take advantage of. There's plenty of information about marketing online, and honestly, the theories apply to every industry. So farming isn't separate from that. Everyone eats, and so there's plenty of customers. Farming is very hot and trendy right now, but it is also a slim margin. And so making money so that you can stay in business is a very important part. And you have to consider what's going to get you there. So I've talked a little bit about these questions, but how does your product satisfy the needs of your market better than your competition? What is your business? What are you specializing in? And how are you fitting in there? And why will my customers want my product? So it just really makes you think about your strategy and how you're going to go after that and set yourself apart. Branding is a really big part of that. Having a consistent and memorable brand. So something that has a stickiness essentially, so that people know what your product is and why it's different or why it's special. Um, at a farmer's market, there's lots of opportunity to get that one-on-one customer relationship. You're connecting directly with your consumer. A farmer's market is really a great opportunity for small scale businesses because it offers a space that has a really low barrier to be able to enter the market. You know, usually there's a small fee for your stall and there's a huge audience depending on which market you're able to access. And you're able to learn and adapt based on customer feedback in real time. So it's can be a haul sometimes, but I can't recommend it enough as a really nice place to start. You know, a market stand on your property can be great, but you're trying to get people all the way to you. Trying to get into wholesale can be a little less legwork, but you are going to be in competition with people that have price points of scale that are really hard to compete with. So you're often only going to get one opportunity to talk to a buyer. And it's important to be ready for that conversation and to establish that relationship. And so it's great to start small and to really feel your way through this. How will the market know I have what they need? What distribution channels are best suited for my product, my customers, and my business? So that's a little bit what I was talking about of starting in a place where you're at. So meeting the market where you're at. What are channel costs and benefits? And what will it take to sustain my market and my channel connections? So if you're setting up a relationship with a restaurant, for example, and you want to be able to sell poultry to them, are you going to be able to sell poultry to them all season, all year? Or are you only going to be able to do it for a few cycles because you haven't anticipated your production schedule? And this happens in diversified vegetables. You essentially want to understand what the needs of your customer are, and so you can meet them and be able to produce to what their needs are, rather than only be able to produce, you know, I can only give you birds in July, but I can't give them to you in August. And so they're going to find another grower to purchase from. If that grower is able to meet their demands, they may not come back to you and that relationship may be over. And it's just something to consider in terms of how you're going to sustain your production and market. Some direct marketing options: farmers market, which I already talked about. In Sullivan County, there are 11 farmers market, which is really great. There's one in most hamlets, and only 5 years ago or so, there was less than 6. So the county is growing, and that's great. It's great for both farmers. It's great for the economy. It's great for the people that live here. It's more access to fresh, healthy vegetables and food. And I think they'll continue to grow in terms of the amount of food that's able to move at each of those markets as the population continues to grow in the county. On-farm sales is another opportunity. So setting up a farm market on your farm. You can create agritourism opportunities through this. It's simple. It's a way for you to have something accessible all the time when you're there, or to have something essentially that is unmanned, which a lot of people will have a farm store that there's a little bit of an honor system there, where they might have eggs in a fridge or milk available in a fridge. You would be able to leave money, mark what you've purchased, and take what you need. You can also have it set up with a staff member, have it more organized. You could do a vegetable farm sales on Sunday mornings when people are often out and about, and create something that's more diversified by bringing in other products to your farm. So say you do diversified vegetables, but you know a baker and they're baking bread. You can sell their bread on Sundays or keep maple and honey products available as well and create a more diversified experience. So people are actually doing more like one-stop shopping at your farm. And this is has been really brilliant for some people. It is some work. So it's a good opportunity to think about as well. You can do internet or mail order. Retail has moved online. And so there's a lot of models for this that I'm happy to go over. E-commerce is really a part of the farming world now. And it is quite complicated in terms of setting that up. For some, if you're not going to go with an outside third-party website. And I'm happy to talk to you a little bit about web service providers as well as merchant providers to be able to get those focused. There's often relationships built between those vendors already. And so in some ways, if you're using Squarespace, you may have to use the merchant provider that they choose. And if you already have a merchant provider, you just need to make sure your website matches. And so these are just all considerations to do ahead of time. Community supported agriculture. This is the CSA model. It is long-standing, and I think it is a really great opportunity for cash flow. Basically, a CSA model is when you purchase your products ahead of time, very popular in diversified vegetable operations. So essentially, you have a growing schedule. You are selling shares of your product every week. You can schedule it differently for the season. So you can essentially schedule, a 20 weeks of vegetable boxes and sell them for $500, $800. It gives you the opportunity to have cash flow ahead of time. You're essentially breaking down the price per box, and seasonally, you're able to give them the freshest vegetables, gives the customer an opportunity to try things that they may not have picked usually. You can really connect with your customers by giving recipes and other personal touches. There's a ton of examples of how people do this, and it's a time-tested model. It really works for some. There is more considerations and work involved in it because essentially you're committed to those shares every week. It can take up some time in terms of boxing them up and creating individual products like that. But it gives you cash flow in the beginning of the season when you need it most. And I can't stress how important that is. It is a great way to build connection and to establish yourself with customers that will become loyal as well. And so again, when you're starting a farm, a CSA is a really great opportunity to reach out to friends and family and get them to purchase directly from you. They might be doing it just to support you at first, but that will grow. And so I think it's a good opportunity to take advantage of. Restaurant sales, there is a lower barrier in terms of distributing wholesale. This is kind of like the first step. Usually making a connection with a chef or an owner is a way to do this. And they'll have specific requests and requirements. It is something that it can be very consistent. COVID has tested that. And so you'll see that so many farms and producers really relied on restaurant sales that really evaporated instantaneously. And that was very disruptive to the market. So people switched to retail. And that's why internet, mail order, e-commerce, and other retail options have really expanded. But I think restaurant sales is a great opportunity. It can be big purchases, very simplified, and you're essentially getting fresh food into communities that are farther away from you. So you're getting customers and free advertising. It's an important source, and it's worth thinking about your network and how you can connect with chefs. People do this by often bringing samples by. Meeting in person is really important, and the chef having the opportunity to see your product, and also having a pick sheet so that they know what's available and when on their schedule, as well as having proper invoices so that you're getting paid on time. So those are some kind of just starter things in terms of restaurant sales. Moving into sales to food retailers, that's larger markets or institution food service sales. This can be a little bit competitive. There's more regulatory considerations, and the production to scale up usually will limit your margins. So you'll be selling a lot more product for less money. So my colleague Michelle is actually doing a wholesaling course tomorrow. So if you're really inspired and really want to kind of consider what the options are, I highly recommend taking her course. There's a lot of sizing consideration and standards in this market, and she's going to go into it. So I won't talk too much further about that here. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Michelle. She's going to go over some of the marketing rules and regulations for the different products listed. And thank you, guys.
All right, so now that you have purchased land, leased land, planted things in the ground, harvested, you went through the whole process, and you have this beautiful bounty of either produce, meat, eggs, whatever you got. Now you're like, how the heck do I even sell it? Like, how does this work? You're on to that next step of selling it to any of the places that Ashley just listed. So of course, there are some rules and regulations regarding different products that we've listed, and I'll go through a couple. And also, if you have something specific that you want to know, if there are certain regulations revolving around that product, I'd be happy to help you through that as well. If you could go next for me, and we'll go right into selling plants. So this is a business that we do see a lot around here in our county. People sell, landscape plants, flowers, starting plants. A lot of vegetable starts is a big thing. If you want to do that, you're going to need to get a license through the New York State Ag and Markets for a plant grower. It's a simple application. Of course, there's a fee, but that'll be part of your business plan that you've already accounted for in order to start your business. So, and the basic idea is to make sure that you're licensed, so Ag and Markets can make sure that there is no spread of pests or disease throughout the state. So it's really important that that you do register with them. If you sell cut flowers or anything like that, there is no license, so don't worry. For selling produce, specifically, there is no, license to sell produce in New York. If you want to go to a farmer's market and sell your tomatoes, lettuce, like whatever, there is no license to do so. However, there is a new FDA regulation, and it's called FSMA, but it's the Food Safety Modernization Act. And that's for all produce, vegetable, fruit growers. And I'm not going to get into it because it is a much longer topic, and I know all about it, but but it's based on your gross income and where you are selling, if you would need to fall under the requirements of food safety for FSMA on your product. It's got a lot of components, a lot of regulations, rules, but it's all involved around food safety. So specifically, selling produce doesn't have any registration to do so, but there is a law that you would need to comply to depending on your gross income or where you're selling. But again, I can talk to you about that all day. But also, just one thing, if you are selling produce at a farmer's market, there is one thing that you do need to do. It's if you're selling by weight, by the pound, ounce, whatever it is, and you're selling that at the farmer's market, your scale would need to be certified by Weights and Measures. So just make sure you call the county, you get your little sticker on your scale, and call it a day. In addition to kind of on the back of FSMA here, For selling produce, it's super important that folks follow good agriculture practices in general. It's all about food safety. No one wants to get anybody sick. Inadvertently, if you don't know what's in your water, and you're washing your vegetables in it, you could inadvertently cause some illness or sickness to vulnerable population, or even the healthiest of us. So it's a good idea to just make sure the kind of the proper times of introducing raw manure into fields. Make sure you test your irrigation and your wash water for E. coli presence. And there's tons of different ways to do this. Again, FSMA goes through a lot of the information on how to keep the poop away, basically keep the E. coli away, keep folks safe, and how to do so. But washing, sanitizing, cleaning is super helpful. As far as meat, if anybody is deciding to grow and raise and harvest meat, for poultry specifically, poultry is a little bit difficult right now as far as getting them harvested if you're looking to get somebody else to do it. And because of that particular instance in New York State, there is an option, and this is just in New York State, so if you're elsewhere, you'll have to check your state's laws, but you are allowed to slaughter up to 1,000 birds on your own property per year, or 250 turkeys. And then you can sell it directly to, farmers markets, restaurants, people, anybody you want like that. And so that's kind of, that's helpful because, again, to get your poultry slaughtered in our area is a bit of a haul and a little bit difficult. So I'll leave it at that for now. If you're harvesting livestock, and you're selling that livestock to a farmer's market, restaurant, you name it, it has to be done through a USDA facility. There's no buts about that. However, there is an option if you are, I'll call it an option instead of a loophole, right?
Yeah.
There is an option if others do take ownership in the animal by purchasing the animal, right? Then that animal can be slaughtered through a state facility or custom processing, and then you can receive that animal, and it will be stamped as not for resale. So it won't be able to be sold because the owner owns the animal, right? So that's that. If you ever see it, it's usually wrapped in butcher paper and it's got a little stamp on it. It's not for resale. So I'm sure it's common. It's one of the easier ways to get animals slaughtered, especially since processing and slaughterhouses are few and far between currently. And of course, the wait times are a bit long. So if you are deciding to do meat, look for a slaughterhouse ahead of time. Ask about their booking schedule, get that ahead, get your dates booked ahead of time before you get the animals, because there's nothing worse than having animals ready to be slaughtered and then you're just paying money to feed them when it's costing you lots of money. Thank you. For eggs, selling eggs is pretty simple. Mostly it's just labeling requirements as far as to sell eggs. So you just, label what they are, eggs, the quantity. The idea is that you want to have a, like an address or a telephone number, your farm name on it. You just want to be able to have somebody contact you in case of an emergency or sickness. There always needs to be some kind of contact information on there. And then of course, eggs must be kept at 45 degrees or lower to prevent contamination, spread of bacteria. It's usually a good idea to candle eggs as well, because you don't want to have an accidental, especially if you have a rooster, you don't want to have an accidental chick or a blood spot. You could lose some customers real quick that way when all you needed to do was do a quick candling.
Michelle, do you want to just define candling for the audience?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, candling, In old school, it was literally a candle that they held the egg up to look inside of it. These days, I've used flashlight, lamp. They have special little candling boxes you can purchase, you can make them, but essentially, as long as you can see through the egg, make sure there's no abnormalities or blood spots, you're good to go.
Thank you.
Yes. Maple syrup. There is no licensing for producing maple syrup and honey. Basically, you just want to make sure you're doing it in a sanitary area, make things as clean as they can be. However, if you are putting any, how do I explain?
Herbs,
What's that?
like if you're putting any herbs like sage honey or something like that.
Right. If you are altering the honey or the maple syrup from its original form, like maple candy, if you're adding any flavors, any colors, you've seen those little straws, maple or honey straws that are different colors, or blueberry, whatever. Those you would need a 20C license to do. And that's just in a commercial kitchen is that product. So as long as you're doing maple syrup and honey in its pure form, you can sell it. No problem. You just have to grade it based on the color. You have amber, and I can't think of the rest of them, but you've seen it, the different colors of maple syrup as they go, but that's the only requirement for that. Making and selling wine. This one, there right now, there's like 4 different types of licenses. I'm not sure if anybody here is deciding to do so, but you have the option of deciding which type of license that you want to do based on what you're growing. So there are individuals who can make wine without having a vineyard. You can be a retail facility that retails the wine, but isn't a producer or a processor of the grapes. You can be a farm winery, which I highly recommend. No, I'm just kidding. I just like wine. But you must have your own vineyard and processing facility, and any purchased grapes must be 100% year grown. So that is a requirement. So make sure that if you are going down this license, that you contact additional suppliers throughout New York State ahead of time before you get going. And then there's the special farm, go back one, a special farm winery, which does not have its own processing facility, but works with somebody else who does. So farm wineries are able to sell their own wine at wineries, farmers markets, restaurants, and anywhere else in New York State. So obviously there's been a big boom. You've seen all these wine trails and wine events throughout New York State. So we've been trying to get more and more vineyards throughout the state going. Now, as far as cider processing, it does need a 20C license to do so. Once you have all your cider apples or ugly apples picked, you go ahead and process them in your approved kitchen. Good manufacturing practices must be followed, along with like sanitation and making sure things are clean, of course. A lot of times with cider, you have to either pasteurize it or use what they call ultraviolet treatment, and that just kills off any bacteria that can come from the apples. And usually if you're in this kind of manufacturing processing industry here with cider, you should have a HACCP plan, which is required for cider and juice processing if you're going to sell wholesale. So if you're not selling wholesale, you don't have to do any HACCP, but it's not so bad. It's not as scary as it sounds. So a lot of times, of course, we are so used to seeing sales tax and everything we purchase, or most everything we purchase, right? But there are products, farm products, that are exempt from sales tax, and that's farm products and food products that are intended for human consumption. So these are exempt from sales tax collection. So you as a farmer don't have to collect sales tax when you sell this. So anything like all fresh processed fruits, foods, vegetables, baked goods, jellies, jams, meats, eggs, dairy products, syrup, honey, cider. So if it's not listed here, there is a much longer list on the New York State taxation website, I believe, of what is and isn't allowed, or what you do have to collect sales tax on. Go next one. So again, here's a couple things listed. So any prepared foods, some value-added foods, candy, cut flowers. That's one that we hear a lot about because folks, will sell these at the farmers markets, but technically you have to collect sales tax on cut flowers, and of course bedding plants, trees, shrubs, that sort of thing. Firewood, Christmas trees, any wool products. So the list, the New York State taxation has a good list going, but if you're unsure, just reach out. But a lot of the fresh fruits, produce, things like that you would mostly sell, you don't have to collect sales tax on. Hay, grain, straw is taxable if it's not being sold to another farmer. Horses, ornamental crops, topsoil. So in order to make sure you're doing this legit, you would fill out your form. It's called DTF 17-I, I believe, or 1, either way. I think it's a 1. That's, you fill out that form if you're going to be selling any product that you have to collect sales tax on. And then you'll be submitting your sales tax records and money to New York State about quarterly. So as with other, you do it quarterly, make sure it's done, and that you're ahead of it, because they'll come for you. They always do. This right here, if one thing you take home with you today, you must listen at this point right now. This is your ST 125. And this is the form that you will fill out and hand to stores when you're purchasing products that are going to be used for farming. You're able to not pay sales tax on them when doing so if it's used for farming. Okay, so print out, go online, type in ST 125 for New York, print out about 10 of these. And as you're, getting your lumber for your fences or seeds or tractor or whatever it is that you're purchasing for your farming operation, hand this to the cashier or whoever you're working with purchasing, and you'll receive sales tax exemption from that. You won't have to pay. So it can add up, especially with large products.
That's great. I think I'd add to, a lot of purchasing has moved online, which makes that a little complicated. So if you are interested in purchasing large equipment or things like that for your farm online, I would try to contact the vendor individually to ask them if they accept this and what the process is, just so they're aware. You may not be able to contact with someone immediately, but there should be a customer service rep that gets back to you, and just to sort that out. So make sure that you have that option available when purchasing online rather than in person. It can just be a little bit more complicated since you're not talking to someone directly. I'm going to go over just a few funding sources that are available here locally and that we always encourage people to take a hold of. These, again, will generally involve having a business and marketing plan. So I encourage you to follow up and take one of our series in the future, as well as just get your ideas down on paper. But there is a Sullivan County revolving loan fund. So that's through the government of Sullivan County. It is encouraged to take a hold of. I think the top loan is $100,000, and you will need a business plan. It is reviewed by a board, and they are trying to encourage local businesses, specifically farming businesses here in the county. It is our second largest industry after hospitality. And it's a great opportunity because these people are engaged in your success. And it also has a 25% forgiveness option. So that means basically if you were to receive a $100,000 loan based on your business plan, so you show that you needed that money and you had the ability to pay it back, you would possibly get 25% of that forgiven, which is essentially a $25,000 grant. It's a very big deal. We have a local industrial development agency. So there is both one for the state, but there's a local IDA. They also have a few revolving loan programs. One is a microloan program and then two other regular business programs. So again, farm businesses are very attractive to these agencies as we are interested in growing agriculture in the county. Dirt Capital is a local funder. They are run by a board of directors, many farmers, agro-business specialists invested in, really growing small scale, organic, regenerative agriculture. There's plenty of information on their website. Dirt Capital has helped many small farms in the Hudson Valley and lower New York region access capital. And so I would give them a look. Kiva is a larger funding source. They do microloans for all sorts of businesses. I think their microloans are about $10,000 to $15,000. They give 0 interest loans, which is a great opportunity. We have a program through Cornell called Small Farms. It's Cornell Small Farms Program. They have a number of beginning farmer classes that are actually tiered pricing, going over vegetable production, orchard management, berry production, pastured pigs, soil science. It's a really great opportunity to get some high-level education for a good price. And one of the benefits of going through these courses, which are usually about 6 to 8 weeks in length, is that you'll have access to a Kiva microloan from taking the course. They have a business planning course. They have a poultry production course that you'll notice a colleague of mine is the lead instructor. And it's a great opportunity. So I recommend checking those out as well and seeing the requirements for that. Farm Credit East, very popular. They have a local agent in Middletown and they offer a number of structured loans. You'll find that they also have specialty tax accountants, and they're a really great resource for farming in terms of just the business and accounting of farms. They are experts in their field. You'll find that both tax and finance specialists often don't know the ins and outs of farmings, which can be very complicated. It has a lot of state exemptions and benefits that if you're not versed in this business, you may not be taking advantage of. And so I really can't recommend Farm Credit East enough. They are the specialists in this industry and they are local in some ways. Middletown is a quite accessible area to Sullivan County. And so it is something that I would look into if you're looking for that type of financial support. You will need a farm accountant. And it has been really helpful for people in accessing funding over the last 2 years, given some of the pivots in COVID and the funding sources available. The FSA is the Farm Service Agency. This is a department within the USDA. They have a number of loan programs that are at very low interest rates. They go over these in detail, both on their website and through a series of webinars. They're pretty accessible, but one of the main, I guess the way they would phrase it is they are a last option lender. So generally they would ask that you go to a conventional lender or some other lender prior and show that you have not been able to obtain conventional lending, and they would lend in substitution. They do not need proof of this, is what I understand. I think this used to be the case, but it is no longer that you need to provide decline letters or things like that. But you do need to show good faith as well as have a structure in place so that you're able to pay back. But sometimes the interest is, as low as 1 to 2%. So it's a really good option to take advantage of. But it would be interesting just to look over the website and see the variety of loans that they do have available. And they do lend out larger amounts of money than some of the microloans and Dirt Capital and some of the other ones that I have mentioned. Another opportunity that I think will come back online shortly, it is something that's been very helpful for small farms in the area, and it's called the New Farmer Grant. It's through the Young Farmers Coalition. I believe it happens every December to January. So it's a $5,000 grant, very small. It really asks you just for kind of a dream vision, what your plan is, who you are. They are focused on having a diverse applicant pool. So they are looking for people that are coming from minority backgrounds, women-owned businesses, people that are of different genders and things like that. So it is an opportunity to both connect to a Young Farmers Coalition, which is a national organization, nonprofit that has a lot of opportunities for young farmers, and get to know and publicize your farm, which is part of what they do. And also have some starting capital that is, you don't have to repay it. It gives you, the opportunity to spend this on anything for your business. So it doesn't have strings attached the way sometimes when you're taking out different loans and grants, it might be specified of how you're going to use it based on what they want, so what the grant is for, what the loan might be for, and what you've said you're going to use the loan for. So I encourage people to apply to this because it's very easy. There's not a large barrier. Hudson Valley Agro Business Development Corporation, which is also located locally in the Hudson Valley. It is another ag service organization. They really help develop farm businesses and help them scale. They have an incubator called Without Walls. It offers funding for marketing, equipment needs for growth, and you can check out their Without Walls program on their website. It really goes over the structure of what they offer and how to apply. So you'll be also submitting a business plan, kind of a mission, and they'll help you walk through what it'll take for you to be a more viable business. Basically, there's been a lot of successful farms that have gone through this program, and I do highly recommend it. Sometimes it can seem a little like the funding might not pay for your staff, might not pay for your seeds. And so in some ways you might not see the value right away, but some of these things that it does pay for are so important, and it's what helps you with sales, and it's what gets you kind of focused on this marketing piece. And it's a very valuable source of both education, expert kind of consulting, and it could be very useful. So I recommend their program as well. This is really a short list. I'm also going to put in our chat today a link to our beginning farmer guide that Michelle has worked on. It is published in about 2018. So you'll see some things are dated. Is basically everything pre-pandemic needs to be said so, I think. But it is a great resource, and there is many funding options included there that you can directly link. It is also located on our website at ccsullivan.org, and you can peruse a number of our beginning farmer options there. So it gives you some resources to other connections, and please feel free to ask about funding. It is often changing. There is many things that have been opened up through COVID for farming, and so I'm happy to help you with that type of development as well. And on that note, I'm just going to go over a little bit. We talked about who we are, Cornell Cooperative Extension. We are a resource organization. We're really trying to bring research to the people. We are in every county in the state, and we are an extension of the university system. The USDA is our federal agency. They have a number of opportunities, information. They have educational programs through them. The FSA, the Farm Service Agency, I spoke a little bit about. There's also local offices for these agencies. And so if you're interested, please contact the FSA directly. They have an agent that will be able to help walk you through some of those loan programs. And I also want to mention New York Farm Net. They're another resource that can be for many of the things that we talked about, but really well-being. They talk about, farm transition planning, mental health, suicide prevention, things that are really important in the farm community that aren't always topics that other agencies have specialties on. So I would give them a look. They can be very helpful and have definitely helped people make connections during the difficult time of 2020 and 2021, which were very intense seasons for farm businesses. And there are so many more. We're often trying to reduce our redundancies and work together in collaboration, but feel free to start with your local extension office and ask questions, and we'll be able to guide you to some of the resources and experts that are located around the area. So I think it's time for some questions. If you guys have any thoughts that you want to share, any questions that are more specific to you, myself and Michelle are available here to go over some things. Either Lisa or Curtis.
I'm also going to put in my email down in the chat too, in case, once you guys digest the information and we send out the recording and the PowerPoint so you can look it over too, we'd be happy to answer any questions for you. I'll put yours in there too, Ashley. Is that all right?
That would be wonderful. I appreciate that. I'm just gonna put a link to our beginning farmer guide in the chat as well.
Okay. Well, we thank you guys for listening through, and we do know we completely understand it's a lot of information, but we try to get it all out there, kind of stir up some thinking, and hopefully, as you go, you kind of recall back that, oh, maybe there was something I was supposed to think of.
Well, thank you so much. It was better than I expected. I felt like I was in really great hands. I've gained so much information, took a lot of notes, and look forward to continuing the education. Awesome.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. We're glad that you could join us tonight. And yeah, we'll follow up.
All right, super. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And any questions from Curtis?
I email you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we're gonna digest this, go over it, see what we have, and then send an email.
Sounds very fair. And there's
yeah, I've been doing this presentation for years and I still have to digest it, so don't worry.
There's
that was a lot. It was good though. I think I would
There's
agree with Lisa. It's it's a lot of information, but it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a while, but I definitely want to get into it though.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's plenty more information on both hemp and marijuana, as well as regulatory requirements. So there's great resources actually on the Orange County website that I'd be happy to send you as well. There's sort of a beginning guide, but Michelle has a lot of experience with it, and there'll be changes and updates coming down the line, I think, for the next few years. So in some ways, it's okay to be in the research stage, I think, as you see things shifting in very quickly in the field.
And I will preface though, just to highlight, as far as marijuana goes, until it's federally legal, we're not allowed to give any advice on it, because of our funding sources. However, industrial hemp, we can talk about all day long.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes.
Great.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all. And email away whenever you have questions or contact, call the office, whatever you need.
All right. Thanks again.
Yep. Bye now.
Thank you all. Have a good evening. Bye.